Welcome back to the Authenticity Calling podcast. I am your host, Ralitza. Thank you so much for being with us today. And today on the podcast, we have a special guest, Kyle Murtagh. Is that right? I did
That's right, Ralitza.
it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's so great to have you here, Kyle. And Kyle knows all about speaking, and we're going to learn more from him. I know this is something that's been a calling for me for quite some time, and I got called onto a stage about 6 months ago, and I was not very comfortable in a room of people that I didn't know. And in my previous life as a teacher, speaking in front of lots of people was perfectly fine. But when I got on stage, I recognized that my spirit had so much to share, but my body wasn't quite comfortable with it. So when
Mm.
we connected, Kyle, I know we really connected on that. So I would just love to hear, and if you want to share with our audience a little bit about how you went from, living your day-to-day life to recognizing that public speaking is something that was really calling you on your journey. So first of all,
Uh-huh.
welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Really do appreciate that. And what you described is one of the reasons I got involved in public speaking. Because my first presentation was a bit of a disaster. My spirit, body, mind were all over the place. Basically, I was at a meeting where people were practicing impromptu speaking, so speaking off the cuff. And the way it worked is you'd be given a question, and then you immediately have to stand up and answer that question in the form of a 2 minute speech. So it's
Mhm.
quite daunting. And my first ever question was, Kyle, if a zombie apocalypse happened in Scotland, where would you go? I'm thinking to myself, what the flip is this? I couldn't believe it. So the heart's going like that, my mind's all over the place. I get up there and I just say two words: the pub. And that was my intro into the world of public speaking. So after that pretty traumatizing experience, I thought I'd better do something about this because I never wanted to feel like that again. I never wanted to feel out of control. I never wanted to feel lost in that sort of situation. I didn't know I wanted to be a public speaker, but I did know no matter what path I took in life, I would probably have to get up in front of a stage, in front of an audience, and speak from a stage at some point. So I thought, why
Mhm.
not look into this, see if I can get better at it? And that's where the path began to me becoming a public speaker. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so wonderful. And you know what? I think a lot of people we think about public speaking and we think, like the motivational speakers on a big stage. We think of Anthony Robbins and,
Yeah.
all these like really big names, but motivational speaking or just speaking in general in front of people, a lot of different uh people in different titles have to do that. Any kind of leader, if you're any sort of leader, you are doing public speaking. You're speaking in front
Yeah.
of the people that you lead, whether
Hmm.
that's being a manager in a small group of two or three people, or
Hmm.
being, the vice president in a company,
Yeah.
or anything in between. Like you might be working in a position where you don't consider yourself a leader, but you are actually public speaking. Like I think of my mom as a nurse. She speaks to the public all the time and getting
Yeah.
people ready for their surgery. And so I think when we think about public speaking, we're constantly publicly speaking. We're speaking to people we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I really do think that what we're about to talk about, it's not just for those who are really inspired with a big message to share with the world, but
Hmm.
really truly anyone can benefit from this. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate, yeah, you coming in and
Yeah.
sharing what you know.
And
And
that's so true. That is so true. And the cool thing as well, when we do get comfortable speaking in front of that audience, say, that the skill set that we've acquired to do that trickles down into our other forms of communication too. When
that's
we're going on a podcast, or when we are doing a networking event, or when we're going on a first date, right? All of these things will benefit as well if we can learn how to speak with confidence in front of an audience, whether that be online or in the room. So yeah, it's a fascinating skill set, and I think it can serve you for your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that you said that. And also, yeah, on publics, people don't consider necessarily Zoom screens. I think public speaking, although I think a lot of people have had anxiety around speaking on this sort of platform. And I
Hmm.
think we, as a society, we haven't really addressed that. Like, there's always
Hmm.
this expectation everyone's going to be on camera, everyone's going to be poised and ready. And that's just not the reality. People have a lot of resistance around speaking on this sort of, digital virtual platform. It's not quite the same
Yes.
as being in person. So I also wonder how that has kind of shifted and affected people, and also, I guess, public speaking and the people that you support. Has that changed?
Mm, yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the pandemic really brought this into everyone's life in a
Yeah.
big way. And a lot of people have struggled with that transition. And then there's others who have really thrived with it and moved with it. And the reality is this is going to be part of our lives, I think, for forever going forward now.
Yeah.
And even if you are an employee and you want a job, you're soon going to have to do video interviews. You're not going to be handing in a CV, you're going to be handing in a video of yourself speaking as to why you should join that company. So it's
That's
something we all
right.
need to get better at. And to answer your question fully, a lot of my work is supporting people with virtual presentations now. And a lot of my training is doing virtual presentations now, which
Yeah,
is great because you can literally reach anyone, anywhere. I mean, you're in Vancouver, I believe.
that's
I'm
right.
sitting here in Germany right now. So this is phenomenal that we can even make this happen. And I think
Yeah.
people should concentrate more on that instead of the worry of how do I look on camera and other little things like that, which are not so as important.
That's right. That's right. The message is so much more powerful. Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, but if you don't mind, maybe take us through like what it's interesting because the project that my son had, and my son is only 9 years old, but he had a
Okay.
project where he had to write a speech and he had to say it in front of the entire class. And so I'm just thinking, if you can explain it to a 9-year-old, you can explain it to anybody. So I'm thinking, what would you say to him to support him and take him through, maybe if it's like the 5 steps or the 10 ways, or if you don't
Sure.
mind just sharing that, I think that'd be brilliant for our audience to hear, because it doesn't just affect us adults. It's really like it's for the kids too.
Yeah,
So.
oh, absolutely. Well, the first thing that your son would have to focus on, and anyone who's creating a presentation, is you have to figure out what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what your key message is. In other words, if the audience could only leave with one idea from your presentation, what would that be? And if you can define that message in ideally 5 words or less, which is not easy, that's golden. Because then that becomes your reference point, your North Star, if you will. It will dictate everything else that goes into the presentation. It decides what your call to action is going to be. It decides what your opening, your hook will be for the presentation, how you're going to earn their attention. And it decides all of the different points you have in the middle to lead to that conclusion. Deciding what your North Star is, your message, is so pivotal. And this is often why people struggle in presentations. They struggle to create it because they don't know what they're trying to say, so they're sort of grasping for an idea. Or number two, they've got so many different points in their presentation that the audience doesn't know what they're trying to say. So we really need to get clear on that. So that's the first key thing. After that, then we can really think about our delivery. So what's your son's name? What's your son's name?
Gabe.
Gabriel. So Gabriel will need to be thinking, if this presentation's in person, how am I going to use the room I have available to engage the audience? Am I going to maybe move to one side for one point and then move to the other side for the other point? Am I going to say my key point in the center? Also, is there some gestures, facial expressions I can use to bring some of my stories that I'm sharing with the class to life, if you will? Do I want to interact with the class as well? Do I want to ask them a question? These sort of things can begin to come to mind as the presentation is developing. Then, of course, after all those ideas are thought through, Gabriel's got to stand up and actually practice. He's got to practice perhaps in mum's office or a room nearby, and he's got to get the reps in, because what a lot of people do is they might write their presentation or they'll create a bullet point plan or they run it through in their head, but they never practice it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And saying it out loud is so different from saying it in your head, I was doing, I'm practicing my German right now, and I did a speech in German a couple of weeks ago. And I practiced it initially in the car, just running it through in the car. And then when I stood up to do it one practice time, it felt even more foreign than before. Because I was
Mm,
so used to just doing it, sitting down, that standing up, I like lost my mind. I lost my
that's right.
place. So
Yeah.
you've got to practice how you perform. If you are in person, you've got to stand up and pretend the audience are in front of you. If you're doing a presentation online, you've got to be in your seat or standing up, presenting on Zoom, Teams, getting that point across. Practice how you perform is absolutely key. And then once you've done that, maybe get a bit of feedback from a mum or a family member or whoever you've got in your inner circle. They can point out things that you can't see, make the adjustments if necessary, and then go out there and enjoy it. Because that's what it should be, an enjoyable experience for you as the speaker and for the audience as well. So that's what I would say, Gabriel, and anyone else listening.
Amazing. Thank you. Those are all really, really important points. And I think it takes me back to actually, these are really important, especially number one, like your key message, if you can put it in 5 words. I think that's every entrepreneur, every business owner, every author, everyone who's writing something, whether it's to
Yeah,
present it out loud or for someone else to read it. I think those are words of wisdom to take. Those are just brilliant, legendary
yeah.
words of wisdom. So the
Yeah.
5 words or less in your one idea. I think it's really important. Something that you said is people have lots of ideas that they try to cram into one presentation. And I've really learned that less is more, and I'm still learning and I'm
Mm,
going to keep learning. I know this is an
yeah.
ever evolving learning for me. Even in
Mhm.
writing emails, it's like part of me wants to give a lot more detail, to tell the story, to take the person
Mm,
there. But a lot of my corporate work is it's very to the point. And I think,
yes.
that speaks to actually why we have meetings instead of putting things in writing, because what is in writing should be point form. And I think, especially as a speaker, if you have all of these, if you have every single word written out in your
Yeah,
message, you get lost in the jumble. And I
you
think it's
do.
so important to have just a few points to inspire you and then really trust what comes through, which really
Yeah.
brings me to the next point about using the room, about gestures and facial expression and engaging the audience in questions. And I start to wonder and I start to question. I've seen speeches before where people are sort of like loud and boisterous and engaging, but it's a very controlled type of way. In other words, it's very
Okay.
practiced, it's very rehearsed, it's not very
Yeah.
authentic. And
Yeah.
so I wonder where or what you would share in terms of tips on how to use these tools, these points, but still make it in a way that is authentic. Because I think for me,
Mm,
that's my biggest fear is I'll get on stage and then I'll have to act it instead of really be in it. And I'm a
yeah.
very passionate person. And
Yeah.
so for me, I think it's very easy once I get into the flow for me to actually want to engage, to feel the energy in the room, to gravitate to that person that might not be listening and ask them a question off the
Yes.
cuff. Like it might be something that's
Yes.
not planned, right? But I
Mhm,
think
mhm.
for a lot of people, and maybe this is like starting versus, novice versus expert. But yeah, I get curious. What would you say to somebody who doesn't ever get on stage because of that fear of inauthenticity or that like
Mhm.
concern about having to act and not
Yes.
feel good doing it?
Well, that's a fabulous question because I've been there myself, in my journey. But when I was initially beginning, I was doing all the gestures, doing all the movement, doing all the stuff, and it was quite clunky to begin with. And I think there's two ways to look at it. One way is that whatever you do for the first time or the first few times or for the first few months or the first few years is going to be a bit rough. It is going to
Mm-hmm.
feel a little bit mechanical. But if
Mm-hmm.
you look at, say, an athlete or a golfer who's been practicing their craft for many years, maybe even decades, there's a
Mm-hmm.
smoothness, there's a flow, there's a effortlessness
Yes.
to the
It
way
just
they do it.
happens. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and how did that happen? Well, a hell of a lot of reps where they weren't effortless, right? And that is the hard answer to the question. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a long time of practicing to get to the place where you're doing it without even thinking. It's just
Mm-hmm.
automatic to you. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like if you're learning to drive a car at first, you've got so much going on. You're thinking about indicating, steering, the gear stick in the middle, the radio, you've got all these things going on. But after a few years of driving, you don't even think about any of it. In fact, you can
That's
do
right.
other stuff. You can think in your head while you're driving, and you
That's
all of a
right.
sudden you're back home. You don't even know how. So
That's right.
it's a process of that. The other thing that you can do, if it is a big concern, is what you mentioned actually. Have moments in your presentation which are completely impromptu,
Mm.
which do involve engaging the audience, which do maybe give the audience a choice. Look, we can talk about this or we can talk about that. What do you want to do? Now,
Mm-hmm.
that is more challenging. It does require more confidence, but it certainly will make your presentation a one-off because there won't be another presentation you do which is exactly like that ever
Mm-hmm.
again, which can bring a
Mm-hmm.
bit of that spontaneity, that energy, that naturalness that
That's
we're, is
right.
that a word, naturalness? Natural way of speaking that we're seeking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and it brings me kind of to question a little bit, sort of about where do you see yourself? Where does your ego lay? It's basically is the thought that's coming through is like as soon as you start to focus on the receiver instead of yourself, right? If you start to
Yes.
focus on your audience and the impact you're actually making, I think it becomes a little bit easier because it's no longer about us. So as soon as we remove the ego, as soon as we remove, because I think a lot of people get caught up and stuck. Obviously, when we talk about personal development, a lot of it is, going inwards and
Hmm.
removing the judgments and removing those kind of layers of self-rejection so
Hmm.
that we're not even in the mind of what are they thinking about me? Or how is this landing in terms of how are they judging me about how this is landing? But more so focus on, am I able to connect to,
Hmm.
for this message to land? And I think that has
Yeah.
definitely helped me is it's not actually about me. Like the Authenticity Calling
Yes.
podcast, I think that is my avenue of becoming more comfortable to share my message because there's so
Hmm.
much that comes through. And I think it's always been really easy to connect with people and have these authentic conversations and just ask curious questions. I'm a very curious person. I ask a lot of questions. And so I thought, I know that there's this calling to become a public speaker on stages. Actually, I
Hmm.
went to an Anthony Robbins presentation in Vancouver. I was here
Uh-huh.
visiting my late grandmother who was in the hospital. She was not doing well. And I remember spending the day in the hospital and then leaving. And I usually don't turn on the radio, but this time I did for whatever reason. And I think my phone was dead, so I couldn't Bluetooth my songs. And sure enough, the first advertisement that comes on is Anthony Robbins in Vancouver, August 8th to 9th. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's tomorrow. I'm going, right? And
Yeah.
so it was one of those calls to action, I call them, from the universe to say, this
Yes.
is your time, go.
Go
And while
now.
I was there, I'm a visionary as well, and I saw myself on the stage next to Anthony Robbins, and I thought, there's no way, like, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be on that stage one day. And
Uh-huh.
then I went back to my teaching career and I thought, well, actually, I could do it. And then I started getting
Hmm.
interested in doing a TED Talk and, looking into that a little bit. And so it's definitely, I also think our spiritual calling, our evolution to become public speakers. I think for a lot
Hmm.
of people that have a powerful message, which I believe a lot of us, like we are here to live a purpose and we just have to find our
Yeah.
space and our audience. But I do think a lot of us have so much wisdom and guidance and support and just our story to tell and to share for that connection, for that human capacity to evolve and to lift each other and to hold each other up. So, yeah, there's just like, it's so beautiful when we can actually get out of our own way and remove
Yes.
ourselves from the picture and recognize that this is so much bigger than us. And it doesn't actually really matter how you look on stage. It doesn't matter if your hair is up or down. I think to me, what's really important is that connection and that like
Hmm.
really truly just allowing what wants to come through you.
Yes. Yes. And I believe you're correct. I believe connection is the number one thing of all. If you can get the audience to see that you're like them, that you understand them, that you hear them, they are going to be so much more receptive to your ideas. They're going to be so much more likely to take action on your words. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do at the end of the day. We want people to do, think, or feel differently after we've spoken. And we
Absolutely.
can't do that without having some form of rapport with them beforehand, in that case. And to touch on your other point, everyone does have something valuable to share. Some of the most impactful presentations I've seen are from people who have just got up to speak for the first time. Because I go to a lot of speakers clubs and places like this where you see this, and some people, they go up there and yeah, their body language is not the best, their voice is maybe a little bit monotone, but what they've got to say is really striking in that particular moment, in that particular place.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And
Beautiful.
it makes me sad sometimes to think about how many people are not sharing value because of the fear or
That's
because of the worries about how they're going to get judged when they're up there or something along these lines, when it's just not the case at all. We think about ourselves far more than anyone else does, I believe.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I have this suddenly I'm like I remember the first time we connected, I looked up where we have what is that international speaking conference the where
Oh,
you
Toastmasters International.
Toastmasters,
Yes.
thank you. Yes, I remember when I was in Aruba, there was a Toastmasters that I wanted to take part in, and then there's actually one here in Vancouver. So thank you for re-inspiring me. I am going to join one of the local branches and maybe just do a little roadshow for myself to see where I feel
Yeah.
most comfortable evolving that skill, because I think it is really powerful. And what you said that your message, even when you're practicing, when you don't know what you're about to say, but you're just there to practice it, even
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
message is actually really powerful and impactful. So that
Yeah.
actually really calls me forward. Stop
Uh-huh.
sitting at home and just, speaking, even just on the podcast, but go out there and connect with people in real life. I think that's something that's really been
Yeah.
powerful as well. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
I love that. So I'm curious if you have any like top 5 tips or tricks for people who are on the stage and in that moment and either like frozen, like people always say, imagine everybody in their underwear. I cannot see how that helps anyone. Like that would make me red in the face and like make me freeze even more. I always think of a clinical setting because I'm a trained physician, and so I always think I don't think that's the right
You don't
way
want
to
to see
make people get
that.
comfortable on stage. It's a very like you want to maintain safety for the patient, and you don't actually want to, cause them to dig deep in that moment. So yeah, I just get curious if you have any sort of tips or tricks for people that are on the stage or in the
Yeah.
moment and freeze up or climb up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it happens to a lot of us. We have a little mind blank and we forget our words, the nerves get too much. The key thing when something like that occurs is to create time for yourself.
Mm,
And there's many different ways you can do that. You can do it simply by taking a drink. And that's
mm-hmm,
quite a natural way to give yourself a few seconds to get back on track. You can
mm-hmm,
also take a pause. You could ask the audience a question. That makes the expectation of speaking on them instead of you. Gives yourself some
mm-hmm,
time. Once again, there's lots of different things that you can do if that sort of situation comes up. And what I always tell people, my clients, is try to prepare how you will react.
mm-hmm,
Because in presenting, you are going to freeze at some point. The
mm-hmm,
slideshow is going to shut down. You are going to get a disgruntled audience member. But
mm-hmm,
what are you going to do about it? What's your
mm-hmm,
next step? If you can mentally decide that in advance, it
mm-hmm,
helps you stay more calm and confident because you kind of know what you're about to do. You know what I mean? But
mm-hmm.
it's when you've not prepared and this thing happens and you didn't see it coming, well, that's when the KO happens. As they say in boxing, the punch that puts you down is the one you don't see. So try
Mm-hmm.
and think about what your top 5 fears might be on stage, and then write down 5 solutions when those fears show
Mm,
up. It helps you feel so
mm.
much more confident being up there.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really important that's a really great example of what we can think of. I think about sales objections,
Oh yeah,
when people go through sales objections when they're training for whether it's entrepreneurship or any kind of sales, you go through the top 5 things people will have as an excuse not to
Yeah.
commit to whether it's a program or, and, with coaching, it's always investing in themselves. And so, yeah, this is great. So, yeah, is there
Mhm.
anything else you would like to kind of share with our audience? I get curious about how you work with people because I'm sure that people will hear this and they'll say, wow, like Kyle's brilliant. I would love to work with him. Do you work
Uh,
one-on-one with people? Do you work in groups? How do you support
yeah.
people?
Yeah, my business is kind of split down the middle, so I do a lot of corporate and team training, but I also work with people one to one, usually coaches, consultants, people selling the invisible, it tends to be, because they need to articulate their message. And
Yes.
I work with them on a monthly basis, and it's a mix of me teaching them key skills that they're interested in regarding presenting, and that can really range. I mean, some people want to know how to add more humor to their presentations, some people just want to
Hmm.
get over the fear, some people want to create a stellar PowerPoint. There's a real mix. But also I will give them feedback
Hmm.
on their speaking. They'll be comfortable enough to send me footage, and then I'll do a full review of their delivery, their content, their slides or props if they have them, so that
Hmm.
they know what they're doing well, but also where they can improve going forward, so they can get that message across in the most powerful way. So that's how I've worked with
Amazing.
people one to one, and it's great because I get to work with so many different types of people. I've been working with a forest ranger lately. He's got some really cool presentations, TED Talks that he's doing. I also work with some people in corporate, and that's a completely different world
Yes.
altogether. So it keeps it
Yeah.
fresh, it keeps it exciting.
Wow, that's really cool. You probably learned so much in a month from your
I
different
do.
clients. That's
I
amazing.
do.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it. And yeah, it's
I'm about to
good.
start work with a decorator, a painter, and they've
Oh,
got a new
wow.
product that fixes mold. You know how you get like mold in houses and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that? So I'm about to become a mold expert. That's where it's
Wow.
taking me.
That's brilliant. I know that's what a lot of people's issues are, having, something by the ocean, by the water, is
Yeah.
how to prevent that mold. That's really interesting. So you know a lot about a lot, actually.
I do, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Another one was a dream therapist. That was
Okay.
a really fascinating one. She talked about maybe you kind of touched on this too with your coaching, how the subconscious kind of shows the dreams, and you can certainly influence it in a way so that you can manifest things in your reality. So that was very cool. It's great fun.
Absolutely.
Great
That
fun.
is really fun. Yeah, that is really cool. My mind goes to people who maybe might not be recognizing the opportunity to work with you is even coaches who are going from one-on-one work to actually recording their work, something that I'm going into as well.
Yes.
I find it really easy to connect with people one-on-one, but when it comes to actually creating content for an evergreen
Mm.
program that has to be recorded and that has to be used, and have that longevity. I think that's really important because something that you said, it's not just about the speaking, but it's also about what kind of content are you going to put? How are you going to place it so it really lands on your audience? And then
Hmm.
also just making sure that it is in a way, again, not too dense. I think a lot of us, because we're service provider, we want to provide value and we just want to throw it all into one little
Yeah.
package. And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting way. Do you help course and content creators to really evolve their packages and create different packages as well? Would that be part of
Yeah.
your sort of, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Three of my clients right now are focused on video. They want to create video content. One of them is for a course. A lot of them are for putting on LinkedIn, YouTube, that sort of thing. I've been creating videos myself since 2018, and so I've learned a lot. I've learned the kind of good, bad, and ugly when it comes to video content. So I can help a lot in that area too, because it is all presenting at the end of the day. Something I meant to say earlier when we were talking about how everyone does public speaking, you actually don't even need an audience now to
That's
do public
right.
speaking. If you have a camera and you film a video and you put it up there, now you've just done some public speaking from
That's
your
right.
own seat, from your bedroom, from your toilet, wherever you've done it.
Yeah.
So that's really cool as well. And videos are a phenomenal way to get across borders and reach even more people with your message, which I think is
Amazing.
fantastic.
That is amazing. That's fantastic. Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Kyle. I think this has been so enlightening, it's been inspiring. It's also almost been like a permission slip. I have permission slips that I give my clients because I think a lot of times we just need to get out of our own way.
Yes.
And I think this conversation really, I'm hoping will open up the door for people who feel that they want to, not even want to, but they have this strong calling, this purpose to share a message that comes through them,
Yes.
to really just do the thing and just get the camera. For me, I'm a human design, I'm a generator. So when it comes
Yeah.
through, I need to make use of that energy and really just put it out
Hmm.
there. And then
Hmm.
it finds its audience. You know, it's that
Yes.
manifestation tool of, or even biblical scripture of created and they shall come, is
Mm.
just put it out there and it'll reach the
Yeah.
right people, right? It'll find its
Hmm.
way. And especially with the metaverse, I think a lot of people poo-poo on the metaverse and say, like, I don't want my phone listening to me, but actually, then it will rearrange the digital world to serve you. It'll, you
Yes.
know, you told your, you know, your best friend, oh, I really need a pair of rain boots because it's going into rainy season, and 5 minutes later, you have all these options in front of you. You didn't even have to search. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting because that is actually the way the universe works. It delivers on what we ask. And I just had
Hmm.
a conversation with someone about this yesterday, but it doesn't hear no. It hears exactly what you say and what you focus on.
Hmm.
And so keeping our thoughts positive, and I think when it comes to public speaking, that would also translate to keeping your message, your feeling in your body positive, that connection, that it's a gift regardless of how it goes. You're
Hmm.
there and it's gonna find its way to land the message, and it's
Yeah.
not about you. So I think those are sort of my summary points in my mind when I think about our conversation. And I'm just, yeah, so grateful for you, so happy that
Yeah.
you found your path. I'm really curious, how did your competition go? Because I know you said you're touring around Europe for a speaking competition.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I've got my next run coming up in May. This is actually an impromptu competition. So the thing I told you at the start about you get asked a question, you got to speak on it. I'm now doing that competitively, and I'm hoping to win the UK and Ireland Championship in May. That's the goal right
Amazing.
now. So that'll be a nice
Amazing.
full circle from two words to hopefully having the trophy or delivering a good message. So that'll be fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, good luck. Not that you need it, and congratulations
Thank
ahead of
you.
time because I really like to put things forward into the universe. And yeah,
Yes.
maybe we can circle back then and hear more about that and maybe your key learnings from that experience as
Yeah,
well.
100%. And thanks so much for having me on. I hope the audience have gained some value from the conversation. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. Thanks so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kyle. And how can the audience find you? Just for those people who are listening, I always
Hmm.
like to
Yeah,
ask to plug all your social media.
absolutely. You can find me in three places. I'm on LinkedIn, just type in my name, Kyle Murtagh, or YouTube. I'm on there as well. And every week I'm always posting video tips on public speaking that you might find useful. Or you can find me on my website, confidencebydesign.co.uk, and send me a message, reach out if you're interested in coaching or learning more about speaking in general.
Beautiful. Thank you. And that's Kyle, Kyle, and the last name is Murtagh. So
That's
thank
the
you so
one.
much, Kyle. It was such an amazing, inspiring conversation. Thank you for all that you do and have a wonderful day ahead, evening ahead for you.
Thank you, you too, and have a lovely day for everyone who's watching.
Thank you. Take care.